But it starts with the top players. It starts with the top players. You're only going to go as far as your top players' ambition and drive are going to go. But your top players have to have some finesse in how they micromanage and deal with their guys, because you're the leader of the team. These are your guys. Just like when you're the leader of an army, if you're the leader of a street gang, or the leader of your press team. He has to be able to have some finesse and understanding of how to manage the guys. And if you don't know how to manage the guys, it's not going to work.
Right.
And, you know, there's times where, like I said, if I know you were struggling, like I'm going to get the ball every time down the floor. So I know you're struggling.
What's going on, y'all? We got a very interesting live today. Been listening to the Toronto media, the NBA media talk a lot about chemistry, leadership. Something strange happens when a team that's as stable as the Toronto Raptors has chemistry issues, melts down, leadership, guys just leaving. We're not used to this happening. This is this kind of stuff that happens in Houston. This is that kind of stuff that happens in Charlotte. Nobody bats an eye. But when a really stable model organization, an organization that other teams look to for how do they do it, let's do it their way. When that type of team has the type of disruptive chemistry issues, coach gets fired, point guard leaves, players stop developing, usually cues a bit of a pause in terms of what is happening here. It warrants an examination. Nobody batted an eye last year when Jalen Green and Jabari Smith are going at it in the bench. Nobody cared, right? Nobody cared that Eric Gordon, who's a veteran leader, was just sitting there like, y'all have this. Doesn't matter, right? Again, when it happens in Toronto, it matters more because this is an organization that is known for high character guys. So I think this is a great discussion. And I think that it is one that we have been having on this channel for over a year. And I think now it is a discussion that is being examined almost in retrospect, where people are trying to figure out who did what, who was wrong, who should have fallen in line. I think if you're the Toronto media, you've clearly assigned the blame to the younger players. We've gone through it ad nauseum. If you're a fan of this channel, we've pulled up clips of Will Lou and Michael Grange and Doug Smith, all sort of insinuating the exact same thing. Young guys were too immature, not good enough, etc., etc. Older guys lost breath. They were trying to get everybody right. You know, even that clip that we played of Thad and Scotty and all the how dare Scotty disrespect his vet. How dare Scotty, all Thaddeus Young was trying to do was get him right. So this became a kind of talking point among the Raptor fan base. And now when you venture off into a board or a Twitter space, this is the conversation that's happening too, right? Is who's supposed to lead? Oh man, if you listen to Dennis Schroeder, apparently he's supposed to lead. Oh my gosh. I don't want to see that. I mean, he's a good dude, but he's not here to lead anything. At the end of the day, you can have all the Chuck Hayes, Charles Oakleys, Charles, like you could have your PJ Tuckers, you could have all those guys, your veteran leaders, you can have your Thaddeus Young. But at the end of the day, if your best players aren't willing to be the right type of leader, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. There's this common myth that Kawhi was a bad leader. I don't think he was a bad leader. I think he's just very uninvolved. But that's not necessarily a bad leader. Kawhi had so much gravity on the Raptors that if he wanted to, he could have destroyed this entire team. I think that's one thing that people don't understand completely about leadership, and maybe it's worth examining, is that the guys at the top have a disproportionate amount of control. But don't let me tell you this. I jumped into a fascinating discussion, or stumbled across a fascinating discussion with Raja Bell talking about Summer League. And somehow this conversation on the NBA show just veered into leadership. And the talking points were oddly familiar because they were exactly what happened to the Toronto Raptors last year. So I'm going to play a bit of a clip there. I'm not going to jump in too much, but I think it lays the groundwork for what I want to talk about today. So hang tight. I'm going to put this on. By the way, thank you to everybody who likes this video. If there's 114 of you, I hope there's 114 likes already. That'd be great. I doubt there are. There usually aren't. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Absolutely. And, help us get on our way to 10,000 subscribers. That would be great. There are some very dope videos coming your way this week. I'm working, doing some editing work. There's an incredible video on Scottie Barnes and one on what I call The Other Guys, a bit of a play on the movie The Other Guys, talking about guys like Otto, O.G, Koloko, Precious, Jeff Doughton, players that I really like, that I think are being criminally underrated by this fan base and also the NBA fan base at large. All right, let's play this out.
Set because of your age, and you had older players on the team, and you may be getting in, you may not be getting in. Like, what can you do to make sure that people evaluating understand how invested you are in this process? Like, and if you're someone who is a competitor, it's going to be.
So just to lay the groundwork for this conversation here, Raja is talking about what we're looking for in Summer League from first-year guys, second-year guys, what you're looking for from, your vets who are cheering on those guys, what you're looking for guys fighting for camp deals. Are you, basically, to lay out what has already happened in this conversation, 17 minutes, they talk about Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson and all of their reflections on their own, Summer League and Vegas in general. But one of the things they're talking about is, do you buy into team, or do you just go out and do your own thing? Do you just go out and score 25 points per game? This conversation we've also been having about how impressive Grady Dick has been for the Raptors Summer League is because he has this quiet confidence and wherewithal, and he's been impactful as hell without ever pressing or forcing anything. So Raja did talk about this, and I implore you after this live, if you haven't listened to this discussion, it's a 47-minute discussion. It's one of the better ones you're ever going to hear. So again, they're going to lay it out, and in about a minute, they're going to start getting into leadership in general and how the leaders on your team ought to lead. So we'll just let them take it away from here.
Human nature to feel like some kind of way about not getting in that game, but you got to channel that and direct that. So instead of having a shit face about it or sulking, right? Like, that's one way to channel it. Hey, you be the most hype and helpful person on that bench. Like, every time people are coming out of the game, you should be meeting them on the court, not when they get to the bench. Your little ass should be jogging out, dapping people up. If there's a little bit of something that you see that you think could be helpful, maybe chime into one of your partners on the sideline and be like, hey, man, watch, they're playing pick and roll like this, but you should be helping. You should be adding to this equation, man. Like, anytime there's a timeout or something going on, absolutely, front and center. If anything is taking place in the game, like, you should be the first one up cheering. Like, these are the things that if you're raised right in this game and you're a competitor, people teach you, how to handle your business. And for the most part, like your partner is a pro, like a high level pro, a contributing pro to winning. Like that's just given. When you see, and I can speak to this because I was both. Like when I played, I was the guy we're talking about. And at the end, and when I was disgruntled and I was being an old jackass, I was the other guy sitting there like, man, I don't give a fuck about this, bro. Like,
you're over here giving the weak
mean?
high five from the bench.
Yeah,
You're not even
like, bro,
really just getting up. You're just like, here, bro.
I'm just trying to go home, bro. I'm trying to get to the crib and see my kids, And so I know what they both look like, and I know what they both can do to a locker room or to an organization, And so, I spend a lot of time, talking to my kids or any kids that will listen, even kids on my teams about that, because it's critical, man. The people don't even know what type of drain, that can have on the collective psyche of an organization or a team versus what type of fountain and addition you can be if you have the opposite energy, and it's really, it's really critical that you get it right.
All of that, Raja. And you can tell a lot about a team and where it's going by just looking at the bench. You could tell a lot by how the team is doing, if the team is going anywhere, if the team is engaged, all of those things by just looking at the bench. If you see someone just like faked out, yeah, whatever. Or if you see somebody just, LeBron is a good example of this because you can honestly just tell by his reactions on the bench what he feels about anything, right? Like he doesn't, his body language will never lie. And
right.
So and that goes both ways, right? Because I see some of the things like, I've seen him be like whack on the sidelines, but I've also seen him engage. Like the last part of this Lakers season, when they were going on that run without him, he was so locked in, giving like high fives, giving coaching and things like that because he saw the team that he had a chance. But like there are other times where he's just like, but that's palpable when you see players, and I don't mean to just single out LeBron because other stars do that too, but like the energy is palpable, and you need that to get your juju good when players are just like, yeah, you're good job, or they're up and they're giving energy.
100%. LeBron is a great example of it. I think he's an interesting one, right? Because he's such a great player. And I think way more often than not, falls into the category of helping instead of hurting. However, the times that stars like the times that stars have the negative body language, and look, you're allowed to have it. Like you're trying to get something done. Sometimes us as role players can't do the things that you do. Like we'll fall short. That's why we're role players and you guys are the stars. But man, I talk about this all the time. It is really, really tough when you play with a dude, and LeBron's not an example of this kind of dude, but a dude who more often than not is going to blame you as the role guy for something that goes wrong instead of shouldering that himself. Now, LeBron's not that guy, but I would say in those times where it's evident that we've let you down, and you can, like, we know we've let you down. So when your body language is bad and you look negative about it, while that's human and it's allowed, man, that really fucks with the role player, man. Like it can, because
star has so much power, bro. That has so much power.
So, I always relate shit like, to the kids. So allow me to do it again. Like Dia's about to step up as the head of a nationally ranked football team down here in Florida, right?
He's
and
a
I talk to
quarterback
him all the time. I said, listen, bro, I lived this. I played with multiple different dudes who were the guy. And the ones that I wanted to play for the most were the ones where if something went wrong, even if they knew it might have been someone else's fault, they knew that their shoulders were broad enough and they had enough confidence with the organization, and it would be much better for that other player's psyche that if they just said, yo, dog, that's on me, don't even worry about it. The guys that you didn't want to play with, the ones that didn't have equity with you, the ones that didn't lead in the right way, were the ones that even if it was their fault slightly, were pointing the finger and placing blame on other people. So I think it's for those guys that are leading, for those guys that are looking for people to follow them, for those guys that are wanting people to get in line and do what you need them to do to help people get toward championships, being able to say like, yo, that's on me. Even if it's not, even if the media gets at you a little bit. I mean, your brand is so strong, nobody gives a fuck. Like, I don't have a brand.
Yeah.
like, why blame me, bro?
My brand is you fucking yelling at me on national television right now.
Yeah. So it like, look, they're again a human, and I'm not talking shit about it, but a lot of times when that human element pops up, and if it's if somebody catches it or if it isn't controlled right away and it becomes a thing, like that can do way more damage to those guys sitting around, trying to live up to the expectations than you would know.
Definitely. It's like, I always think about the story about, I think it was I forgot which Super Bowl it was. It was
All right. So hopefully that explains it. And I think there are a ton of examples of this in NBA history where, yeah, even when a leader doesn't necessarily encourage guys the way you want them to, they're maybe mean spirited, they hold themselves to a higher standard than the team, which is to say that it doesn't really matter who your leaders are, right? I mean, it could be your coach. For young teams that lack superstar or great leaders, often it is the coach. Sometimes it is an experienced veteran at the end of the bench who's sort of teaching a young player how to lead, right? This happened early in Michael Jordan's career. Leadership is involved to some extent. You do have to involve yourself in difficult discussions that need to be had, which means that, when things are going wrong, it does mean that sometimes you have to yell. It sometimes does mean you have to be a psychologist. It does mean you have to be a mother and a father on the team to some extent. The worst type of leader is two types. Those who are uninvolved and uninvested completely, which is to say that I get mine, y'all get yours, y'all don't get yours, not my problem. This is one type of leader. The other type of leader is the micromanager that nobody respects, who blames everybody else. In a nutshell, what I'm describing is Pascal and Fred, in a very clear way. And it doesn't really matter like what you say about Thaddeus Young being a leader. I mean, when you have a guy who isn't playing for 30 games in a row or whatever he didn't play, his voice becomes diminished. He's not out on the court, right? He just becomes another assistant coach or a trainer on the bench. It doesn't hold as much sway. If Pascal Siakam had wanted to last year, and I'm not saying that necessarily he knew to, but if he'd wanted to last year, certainly I think that it came down to him having a difficult conversation with Scotty or him having a difficult conversation with Fred. Now, you want to talk about that Charlotte game. We did the post-game breakdown of that game and the low light film of that game, and you very clearly see Pascal Siakam going up to Fred VanVleet after he missed a layup that would have gotten Fred his 20th assist and saying, my bad, yo, my bad. That means your leader in the run-up to the playoffs is encouraging stat padding by a player trying to get paid. Now, I'm going to explain to you very clearly why this entire situation bothered me so much from the onset. It reminded me of a situation in my own life. And far too often, I think that we sometimes ascribe something that's happening on the screen and reflect it back to something that happened to us. And I think if you're a kid out there who had functional parents, you're lucky. Congratulations. But a lot of us didn't have functional parents, but didn't stop us from getting blamed for a lot of the stuff that was going wrong. And you would often look at a dysfunctional parent or a parent who was leading you the wrong way, or even a teacher. I mean, I'm sure we've all had teachers who were terrible teachers. The power dynamic of a teacher and a student is that the teacher says jump and the student says how high. But what if the teacher is terrible and does not hold themselves accountable? What if the teacher is terrible at teaching? Should the student then not have some sort of leeway into questioning the teacher? I think that when two players who have seniority within an organization, have won a championship within that organization, and maybe just generally speaking, have a lot of vested interest in holding the reins of power within that organization so as to hold certain guys down and elevate other guys up. I think when the leadership within that organization is inherently selfish, and this is not moral selfishness. This is not like they're out there trying to screw other guys over. It's selfishness in the sense that they put themselves above other players' interests. And I don't think that's necessarily a great leadership quality. And what we heard Raj about sort of, you know, whether you do it front facing or whether you do it in the locker room, accountability, when you yourself are struggling, like when you have a 6 for 20 game, coming out and saying we played funky lineups and we lack depth, or we're playing too many minutes because we don't have a bench, these types of things rub people the wrong way, especially the 14 other players that aren't you, that aren't being paid the maximum amount of money. What I found the strangest about this entire season was that we had this entire media and a lot of this fan base siding with the guys who were not only getting the most money, but also getting the most opportunity, and therefore had the biggest amount of power within that organization. And yet somehow, through some mind trick of manipulation, they were able to skirt the responsibility, deflect blame onto the entire roster. And now we are sitting in an offseason where half this fan base genuinely believes that every player not named Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam on this team is absolutely shit. So it worked. It worked, right? Because you never really saw this team without both of those guys, right? And if you did, it was like a one-game sample in which there was no chemistry to be built. And so the question then becomes, where do the Raptors go from here? Because you certainly haven't inherited a Tim Duncan or a Michael Jordan or frankly anyone. You have a whole bunch of weird options. You have Pascal and Thad, right? How much is Thad going to be able to lead? You really do have just Pascal there. Or you have Scottie Barnes, who says, you know, I'm a natural born leader. You have OG. You have Dennis Schroeder, kind of like an outsider coming in, but he's familiar with the coach. He's one of the players who's really played with this coach. Could he see this as, hey, Fred was this to Nurse, maybe I'll be this to Darko? Does Gary step up and have a leadership role? Does Otto have something to offer in this regard, especially if he can start to play minutes? Does Precious Achiuwa maybe, you know, step into a bigger role? Does Chris Boucher have something to say as one of the older players on the team? I got to tell you, you know, two things that, I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a psychology degree. But I think two things that have made me very good actually at reading the body language of basketball players and understanding chemistry without even having to step into a room. And of course, this is very polarizing and very controversial for a lot of people because they call it quack science. And, you know, it's not really science. I mean, if you've played basketball, you know what good body language is. You also know that people have bad days. So you have to study it over a period of time. And for an entire half season, you see that things are just not looking how they're supposed to look, and people are not behaving how you've known them to behave for 6 years. Yes, you can interpret a lot from that, especially with a large enough sample size. Two things that have made me really good at this is, number one, I direct films for a living, which means that I'm constantly like asking actors to perform a certain way. So I have to take two strangers who've never met each other, are meeting each other for the first time, and say, you are now father and daughter, or you are now, you know, a married couple that have been together for 20 years. And then I get to say cut when they don't do it right. You know what I mean? So I know what it's supposed to look like. This has kind of been my whole life, you know, studying people, studying body language. That's one thing. The other thing is just understanding who all of these players have been for a long enough period of time has given me a great understanding of when they're off, right? You watch Scottie Barnes for 5 years. You watch Scottie Barnes last year. Is a completely different. Is a completely different person. So he becomes a really good barometer or gauge for what's happening within this team. Obviously, surprise, surprise to nobody, I would obviously elevate Scotty into that leadership position because of one key thing. He's never, ever thrown anyone else under the bus, even when he can, even when it's convenient, even when it's over. Right now, right, he's taken the brunt of so much criticism for what happened last year, right? Oh, he didn't work hard enough. He didn't grow. He flatlined. He's sophomore slump this. He had a terrible year. Is he still going to be a star? He didn't work hard enough. Work ethic issues. Didn't attend this. Didn't do that. Didn't train hard enough. Okay. Did at any point when all that storm, and you know he heard it, you know he saw it, you know he's aware of it, you know people were tweeting it at him. At any point did he come out and defend himself by saying, yeah, but look at the leadership. Look at what's happening on the team. No, he always found a way. You know, he led this team. He did what was necessary at all times. When they needed him to go down to 5, do you think he wants to play 5? Like if Scottie Barnes could design an offense, do you think he would choose to set screens for people? No. Now he has the entire league. You know, this guy came in as a top 5 recruit as a point guard. Now, 3 years later, playing this, you know, sort of hustle big role with the Raptors so that Fred and Pascal can be who they want to be in this offense. He has people genuinely questioning 3 years of development later if he can even be a point guard in the NBA. Is it good for his brand to be Draymond for these dudes? I don't think so. Is it good for his basketball career? No. Is it good for his evolution and development? No. All it was good for the Raptors. To me, it felt like Scotty and Fred were having a staring contest, and they were like, who's going to blink first? You know, like who is funny? Do you know there's a story? It comes from Seinfeld. Shout outs. Give this video a like if you like Seinfeld. It's a good one. Don't worry. I'm not gonna wax poetic. It's not gonna go into a weird direction. There's a disagreement between Newman and Elaine about the ownership of a bike. This is an old parable or something. It comes down. The wisdom is as old as time itself. And between Kramer and Elaine. And Newman is the impartial party that is told to decide who is the rightful owner of this bike. Kramer performed a service. Elaine is not satisfied. Who owns this bike? And so Newman says the only solution is to tear the bike in half, is to split it down the middle. And Elaine says, sure, do it. Screw it. I'm done. If I can't have the bike, no one will have the bike. And Kramer says, no, please just give it to her. I would rather the bike go to her than to see it destroyed. Do you understand that's basically what happened to the Raptors last year? I mean, if you're smart, I think you get this pretty easily. Scotty wanted to play point. OG wanted more opportunities with the basketball. So what happened? They started out that way as they did the year before. It started out exactly how it was supposed to go. And by game 10, Nick Nurse, Fred VanVleet basically said, screw this. We're going to do what's best for us. Because obviously Fred VanVleet is better at handling a pick and roll than Scottie Barnes. But that was neither here nor there. That was neither the point. Obviously, Fred VanVleet playing those 5 minutes over Malachi Flynn is better for the team, which means better for the wins. But it doesn't mean that if you had given Malachi Flynn that consistent run over the years, that he would not have grown into something, or that Banton could have had a consistent role, developed some chemistry. Every single time there was a decision of, do we compromise or do we blow it up? One side chose to compromise, the other side chose to blow it up. Nick Nurse coaching for wins didn't help, okay? The mandate, obviously, from Masai Ujiri, okay, we need Precious Achiuwa to get minutes. We need Christian Koloko to start. Obviously, you can see when Nick Nurse was pushed into making decisions within the roster. But when you gave him control over how many minutes Fred was going to play, It was as many minutes as Fred could play, regardless. And who does that really help? Who does it really help? It helps Coach Nick Nurse. It's a mutually beneficial, mutually abusive relationship. It helps Nurse get his wins. It helps Fred get his numbers. Who does it not help? It doesn't help Scotty. In my opinion, it doesn't help Scotty. Long term, it doesn't help the team. Have you noticed that? That whenever you have an employee or a coworker or a partner or a friend that's not really with you, everything is short term. There is no concern for your long-term safety. There's no concern for your long-term well-being. Oh, I can't afford that. Oh, just put it on your credit card. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Because they're going to be done with you. They're going to be done with you. Like, you are being used and you're an idiot. So you don't know it. Just put it on your credit card. Rack it up on your credit card. I think we've all had that person in our lives. That's basically what happened to the Raptors last year. Honestly, just think about it. You don't think Scottie Barnes wanted to play point? Of course he did. But the offense doesn't work because the other guys are just like, if you're doing that, I'm not doing what you need me to do to make this work. Until we get to the fourth quarter and it's winning time, and now we're willing to do it because we're desperate and we're competitive and we've completely lost sight of our numbers, or we already got our numbers and it didn't work, or we're down 15 points and, okay, man, you're our best hope. And now suddenly Pascal is moving off the ball and Fred is setting a screen for Scotty. Yo, there are 4 players on the court who need to do things for O.G Anunoby to do what he needs to do. Just like there are 4 players on the court who need to do things for Fred VanVleet to get open, or for Fred VanVleet to get downhill, because God knows he's not a creative isolation scorer or a great paint finisher. There's a lot of people that need to do things in order to unlock the guy with the basketball. And too often, this frustration within me was building because I would see these guys doing something that they didn't want to do coming into the year, but that they were forced to do because it is the only way that Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam would let this team play. Or it's the only way that Nick Nurse would let this team play. So this is basically what it was. And then insult to injury, when playing that way didn't work, well, it's the guy with 4 points. It's his fault. It's the guy with 2 minutes. It's his fault. This is extremely frustrating. The problem is that the people who comment on this are not leaders. The media, these people, have never led anything in their lives. I'm willing to bet a considerable amount that the vast majority of people who are assigned to talk about the NBA haven't really led very much in their lives, and probably have not played a ton of basketball in their lives. Because if you've played basketball in the NBA, you've definitely led something at some point. You were either the leader on a high school team, or the leader of an AAU club, or the leader in college. You were the leader at some point, whether you became a leader in the NBA or not. But I think a lot of these people, who talk about the NBA for podcasts or writers or these media beat guys, they're just employees. They're employees with a boss. They don't know what it's like to lead. They don't know what leadership is. Maybe they've never had a good leader, or maybe they're just of the mindset that the older you are, the more you get to boss other people around, because that's the mindset that they were grown into. That's the mindset that they bought into. That is not the mindset that I would ever hope would be. That's not the mindset that any successful company has. I assure you. It doesn't matter that the CEO is 24 and the senior vice president is like 70. If the CEO has the right idea, the correct culture, the right company culture will go with the right idea. This is how this has to work. So every time I've heard someone say that Scotty needs to listen to the vets because what has he done? This is when I realize that y'all don't know what you're talking about, because that's not how any effective organization should ever run. Bobby Webster is in his 30s. He is informing people who are well more experienced than him on how to do their jobs. Why do you think that is? Because he's clearly proven that he is not an average 30-something-year-old. Masai Ujiri was leading front offices when he was in his early 40s. He obviously proved something at a very young age. These people understand that leadership does not have to be the oldest guy or the most experienced guy or the guy with a championship. So anytime you tell me that Fred and Pascal are the definitive leaders, I tell you because they won a championship here and they're the most senior guys and most experienced guys, I just say, no, I don't believe that. I think the last year has done so much in terms of damaging the value or perceived value within this franchise, within this fan base of these other guys. So, do I want Pascal traded? I don't care. But the only reason that I lean into yes, it's a very selfish reason. And I'm being very honest about it. The only reason I lean into yes is because I want every single person who said that these other guys were at fault and that these other guys can't lead, I just want them to see how wrong they are about these other guys. I'm not saying you'd be better. I'm not saying you're going to magically, fix all your issues. I'm not saying that Scottie Barnes isn't going to struggle or that O.G Anunoby isn't going to struggle. Happy birthday, by the way, O.G. I just think that these guys have more natural qualities that I would look for in a leader than Pascal and Fred. They don't talk like it, and they may not play like it yet, but leadership, selflessness is a really big part of leadership. Accountability is a really big part of leadership. I've never seen OG or Scotty throw anyone under the bus. I've never seen them deflect responsibility from what they did wrong. I've never seen them deny making a mistake. I've never seen them not own up to the part that they are playing in creating the problem. I've never seen them overhype themselves up after a big game. I've never seen that. And you know what? If you're a Raptor fan, you've already seen selfless leaders. You've seen DeMar. You've seen Kyle. You've seen Marc Gasol. You've seen Kawhi Leonard. You've seen what this could look like. And I think for the Raptors, this is exactly the direction you should go. Okay? Not because I'm the biggest Scottie Barnes fan on the internet, but just because he is your absolute best hope in terms of a personality profile that is designed to lead. I look forward to that. The analytics videos are going to come out this week for sure. I have them scripted. I'm going to get to work. They're going to be nice and edited, and they're going to be quick hitting, and hopefully they can undo some of the damage that has been created around some of the role players on this team. Because look, I get it. When you are a average, no offense, sports fan, and your team is losing, you naturally look for someone to blame. Okay. And most of you have never played in the NBA, and neither have I. And so when you're looking for how to figure out who's doing what, you typically reflect back to something that you understand. And for a lot of people, that's something you understand is working at Walmart or working as a greeter or working as a cashier or working as a server or working in construction or any one of the handful of day-to-day jobs that people hold. And the problem with that is those are labor intensive. So when you start looking at who is at fault, you feel almost morally obliged to not blame the person who's playing 40 minutes and scoring 27 points. It's much easier to blame the person who played 38 minutes and scored 4 points because that's the way our brains work. But this is, trust me, a psychological, deficit. It's not like a psychological deficit. What am I saying? It's a bias. It's a bias towards production and a misunderstanding of production. And I assure you, as someone who broke down a lot of film last year, that the guy who scored 4 points or 8 points or 12 points did a lot of stuff in the context of the basketball game to allow the guy who scored 27 inefficiently, most likely, to do what he was doing. And at the end of the day, this entire concept of glory and blame, you cannot give glory to one and blame to the other. That's not logical. It doesn't work that way, you know? I have to accept as a founder of a film festival that when things go very, very badly, I don't get to look around and blame everybody else. And I've done that before. And I can tell you it sucks and it dries people out. I've been on a film set where I've felt that things were going really poorly because of my DOP or because of my sound designer. And in that moment, it's very tempting, if you're not a good leader, if you're not a natural leader, to blame that person, to hold them accountable, to make sure that whatever shame you are experiencing in that moment is transferred. If you give me 3 minutes of your life right now, I'm going to hopefully unlock something in terms of how this entire thing works in terms of shame deflection. Nobody wants to lose a basketball game. Agreed? Yeah. If we went 82-0, we'd be a really happy fan base, probably have a lot of happy players. Even the whole dysfunctional vibes would probably not be existent. Losing exacerbates everything. Why? Because losing creates shame. It creates shame in the tabloids, the papers, Instagram, Twitter. You start losing 4 or 5 games, everyone starts to feel the shame. As fans, we start to feel the shame because the jersey that we're wearing says Raptors, and now the Raptors are craptors. Everyone's clowning us. So when a Bulls fan or a Detroit fan says, y'all are trash, we're better than you, what do you feel? You feel shame. So what do? What do you do when you're loaded with shame? Typically, you try to reflect, deflect. You push it back. You push back the shame. So you try to create shame in the other person. So I'll feel less shame if you feel more shame than I feel right now. So what will you say? Y'all haven't won a championship in 15 years. Shame back, right? So we may have a dysfunctional roster, right? But y'all don't have a championship in the last 10 years. Y'all don't have a championship in 25 years. Y'all never even won a championship. Oh, okay. Shame back. The same thing happens within the dynamic of the sport itself, within the players, within the locker room. When Fred VanVleet has to come to the podium and answer for his 4 for 22 night, there are really 2 options to deal with whatever shame he is feeling. Number 1, he can own it. Number 2, he can dish it. He can push it back. If you've seen Fred VanVleet in pressers after he has a big game and the team loses versus when he has a bad game and the team wins, you will very clearly notice that this is a player who very much cared about himself. That's not moral. This is psychological. This is the second part of this. We are very quick to say this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. Also the way our minds are wired, because every story we heard as kids was about bad guys and good guys, cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers. There's always a bad guy and a good guy, right? So if every story, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, every story we heard, there was an antagonist and a protagonist. And so we often ascribe this sort of framework to everybody. But what if I told you there are no bad guys and there are no good guys? Everyone's a good guy. Everyone's a good girl. Every single person in this world, whether the person who spit on you in the subway or the person that held you up for money or whatever, they're all good. That sounds crazy, right? It's not that crazy. Actually, I think inherently everyone is a good person. I think even the person screaming on the subway and being totally racist is a good person deep down. The problem for them, and the problem for a lot of people that we call bad, whether they be criminals, whether they be drug addicts, whether they be, abusers, whether they be broke, we call them bad, right? I think the problem for them is they're really bad at problem solving. No one taught them how to solve problems, or when they were learning how to solve problems as children, they didn't learn how to solve problems properly. So, case in point, you have a problem, right? You have a problem with another kid, right? I'm your parent, and I got to teach you how to deal with that problem. And I tell you, go beat the shit out of that kid. I have now taught you an incorrect way to solve a problem. If I tell you to ignore it and to not deal with it and to just grin and bear it, I have also taught you a terrible way to solve a problem. If I solve it for you, I have now deprived you of an opportunity to solve your problem. You understand? Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, all of these people. I mean, this is like, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to these people, okay, in their lives. And I don't need to necessarily go into it. Fred went into enough of what he went through as a child, his father passing, hating his stepfather, etc. This is a very tough thing. My father also passed, and I also hated my stepfather. So there's like, I can understand where he's coming from a little bit. So when you grow up in this sort of fight or flight, doom or die, sort of situation all the time, you react very poorly to problem solving. Your brain does not properly learn how to solve problems. You only know how to get angry. And Fred talked about, maybe at a young age, getting angry too much. I also got angry a lot. I've gotten mad at these callers. The problem becomes when we try to assign moral responsibility for what is effectively a problem-solving deficit. These people are not bad people. Fred is not a bad person. Pascal is not a bad person. Scotty is not a bad person. None of these people are bad people. They are all, however, good people trying to win. They care. They all care. But what do they care about? This is the problem. Scotty cares about winning. He cares about his teammates. This is important. So any shame that he may experience or feel, and I'm sure he doesn't care too much about it, but when you pick up the Toronto Star and you see Scottie Barnes' work ethic issues, and everyone's trolling you on Twitter, and everyone's calling you autistic because of the way you ran, you don't think that some people might feel a certain way about that and feel some shame? You don't think that when you go out and have to answer for 8 points, 4 rebounds, and people are asking you, so are you injured? What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Like, what's the biggest thing that you have to do from last year to this year? You don't think there's a little bit of shame and anxiety to that? Of course, he's a human being. He's 21 years old too. There is a human component to this. But at no point did he take that shame and throw it to somebody else. He never said, oh, it's fan expectations, they're stupid, which is kind of like what Fred VanVleet did. He deflected it, right? Fans are stupid. There's nothing a fan can tell me about the NBA. He never said it was the media's fault. He never, directly confronted Doug Smith. He never said, Doug Smith is a fat hack and, he doesn't know anything about basketball. He didn't do that because that would create shame for Doug Smith, right? He just took it. He didn't blame his teammates. He didn't say, well, I play with a whole bunch of non-shooters and I'm a straight line driver. What the hell do you want me to do? Because that creates shame for other people. What Raja Bell said was poetic. When you're a leader, you own it. You take it even when it's not your fault. You allow people to say things because you know at the end of the day that you have something special, that your shoulders are broad enough to carry the load. And I think that Scotty's shoulders are broad enough to carry the load. And I think OG's are as well. OG has never minced words through his agent about wanting a bigger role in the offense. I don't think he's ever come out and said, Fred and Pascal didn't pass me the ball enough. Again, how do you deal with shame? For some people, shame is crippling. They must get rid of it. For some, shame is a non-issue. I think for the people for whom shame is a non-issue, they learned how to solve problems correctly. And what is an NBA locker room if not problem solving? Constantly problem solving. Player is down about minutes. That's a problem. Solve it. A lineup is not working. Problem. Solve it. You have an injury. You need to implement a new player. It's problem solving. Life is problem solving. Basketball is problem solving. On the court, it's problem solving. They have a big defender in the paint. You have an undersized guard. Problem. Solve it. They're playing zone and you don't have shooters. That's a problem. You need to solve it. Am I trying to say that Scottie Barnes' greatest gift is his ability to solve problems? Hell yes. It's a dude who's been solving problems correctly his whole life. And I hope that as he ascends more to a leadership position, that y'all can see that everything that was said about him last year is categorically false. That a lot of the talk about his work ethic and maturity issues are overblown and ridiculous. And I'm just here for it, man. I'm going to be here for it. And yeah, I think this has been a great journey for me as well. Covering a dysfunctional team in our first year as a channel was amazing for me, because cathartic, as it, as frustrating as it was at times, it was also cathartic. It was cathartic because I had to learn a lot about myself in this context as well. Because early on in this year, when people would try to shame me, they would try to say like, oh, you're a Scotty dick rider, you're, a fanboy, you're racist because you don't like Pascal Siakam. All of these sort of things that were hurled at me, obviously they create a great deal of shame, because they're very mean, nasty things for people to say. People have, said all sorts of stuff on Twitter. And every time, I felt it. And then I stopped. I stopped needing to push it back. Now when I read comments about, oh, you don't know anything about basketball, you're an idiot, just talks on Twitter, you're not this, you're not that. Whatever used to happen doesn't happen anymore. It's not happening. So this has been I hope this has been a great discussion on leadership. I hope this can elevate and evolve the discussion that we've had about Scotty, Pascal, Fred, OG, and their roles on, in terms of leadership. And I hope that the people who cover this sport, or cover this team specifically, Will Lou, Blake Murphy, Michael Grange, Doug Smith, etc. I hope someone, is able to convey some of this information to these people, because I genuinely don't think that they completely get it. Maybe Will does, but the rest of these guys don't really seem to get it, because I don't think they've ever had to go through the trials and tribulations of being a leader. And as someone who has been leading ever since I was 16 years old, anytime I could lead, be a captain, I'm for it. Be president, I'm for it. Be any sort of leadership, I wanted it. Do you know why I wanted it? Because I was terrible at it. But I knew that someday I wanted to be good at it. And I was horrible. Horrible director, horrible festival director, horrible frat president, horrible, boss, horrible manager. I have been at the top of so many of the food chains that I've been a part of, and I have disrupted and screwed up. I must have been the most unnatural born leader. Everything about Scotty is the exact opposite with me. Like, I don't have that. I feel an ounce of shame. Like, you're like, yo, my paycheck is late. I'm like, you're late. You know what I mean? Like, I lacked that ability. Even within relationships, friendships, I led a lot, and I failed a lot. And I've learned a lot from watching Scotty about how to lead properly. I've watched Masai, how to lead properly. How many times has Masai deflected blame for this season on something other than himself? Maybe it's me. That's a direct quote. Maybe it's me. Maybe I have to be better. Dude, absolutely. Absolutely. This is what you need in leadership positions. You don't need our scouting department changed, the good people left, our coaches changed, our development staff left, Nick Nurse is at fault. He didn't throw anybody under the bus, yo. That's high class. That's leadership. Anyways, make sure to hit sub up, guys. I really, I'm glad I got to have this discussion in long form. And quite frankly, I think it's something that needed to be said, and I'm glad to say it. Make sure to hit subscribe. And I'm just going to get to a few comments. I didn't want this live to go too long, and I just kept talking and talking and talking. I should sell a course on leadership. That's funny. Exactly. Maybe, but I genuinely think we're all good, man. Like, I don't think anyone's ever come out of the womb and decided to be destructive in this world. I just think we didn't learn how to solve problems, or, you know, we were overloaded or overburdened with shame or problems that we just couldn't deal with at too young an age, man. Like, if you lost a parent early, your parents went through divorce, and nobody ever explained that situation to you properly, they didn't know how to, that's not really their fault, but it's not yours either. And you got to do a lot of work later on in life to undo, 20 years of bad wiring. Something I've realized a lot. I lost both my parents really early, experienced a lot of poverty, a lot of struggle, a lot of abuse, a lot of, rejection, a lot of pain early in life. And I'm very happy for it now. But in the moment, shit, like my girl and I, we were listening to the best song for every single month since 1980, right? So I'm born in 87. So I got to tell you, like 1994, 95 those songs started to come up, and they evoked so much sadness. From 95 all the way till about 2008, almost every single song that came on, I can remember some fight, some terrible moment, some abuse that happened. And I was just like, holy shit. But then every song after 2009, 2010, it was like, I don't associate any negative feelings with that. So this has been like a 15-year healing journey to this point, and it's been really good. And I'm really glad, because I got to tell you, there's a lot of people that get stuck in that place and they don't come back. But yeah. Tony's saying you don't have to even set the leader. You can just let the team choose and accept the voice they'll follow. If Scotty's a born leader, he'll make it through naturally. I agree. But there's natural leaders, and then there are forced leaders, right? I think Fred and Pascal were forced leaders. By the end of the season, though, if you really pay attention to the bench, and I know that you do specifically, you'll notice that Jeff Doughton, Precious Achua, Christian Coloco, O.G Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., they were all looking to Scotty as their leader. Whether they say that or not, there was more of a camp forming. And look, I will say this, say what you will about Scotty. There aren't a lot of rookies who would have rebelled against an all-star. There just aren't. There's a lot of rookies out there, even highly touted ones, who are not headstrong enough, not confident enough, not bold enough, not sure enough, not anything enough to be able to stand up to Fred VanVleet. Okay. Some guys would just take it. Some guys would be like, they would start second guessing their own reality. When you have a dude who's basically gaslighting you and telling you that his 4 for 18 performance is your fault. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how much confidence do you have in your own perspective to be able to say, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. You know what I mean? It's hard. It's super hard. Talk to any psychologist. Like, if the power dynamic is so vastly in favor, and the seniority and the experience is so vastly in favor of one person, that person has an unimaginable amount of control over the other person, right? Which is why, LeBron James, if LeBron James goes to Austin Reeves and he's like, yo, bro, I've been around this league for 19 years. You're never going to make it. That's a really tough pill to swallow for Austin Reeves. But if Austin Reeves went up to LeBron James and said, yo, man, I've been watching this game for 15 years and you're not him, like, do you know what I mean? It doesn't do anything. So the dynamic of a younger player is so much like, so even if Scotty is wanting to lead, if the organization refuses to see him as such, if 4 players or 2 players who are taking the vast majority of shots and his coaching staff refuse to see him as such, I certainly don't think Earl Watson and Rico Hines were in any rush to anoint Scotty leader. I don't think, Nick Nurse was going to let that happen. And so eventually what you saw was what you saw. You saw the Charlotte game where Fred had 20 and 20 and the locker room was basically muted. You had Scotty, Gary, OG, and all those dudes sitting on one side. Compare Fred's 20 and 20 game to Pascal's, 52-point explosion. It's a completely different vibe. So look, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I really do think that it was mainly a Fred creating problems and Pascal following situation, not really there. So I can't say specifically if Pascal would just fall into line without Fred being here. But I do see a lot of really good leaders on this team. I see Jakob Poeltl as being a really impartial guy who's never really thrown anyone under the bus. He's never really talked ill about people. And I think, apart from the fancy schmancy, this is how you lead stuff, I think ultimately it just comes down to being a good person. I think better people are just better leaders. I want to see a Robert film. Check out Pinsire Films. There's a lot of them there. Anyways, guys, talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Peace.